Hello, friends. In today's installment, I'll be starting out with a deception exercise to show that what we observe is not always what actually exists. Alright, check it out. So I got my wallet. I got this tin can. I'm going to put my wallet under this tin can. Ta-da! It's gone. Nothing here. This, I think, demonstrates my ability to control the way you interpret what you believe to be true. During the brief exercise, you can only see what I present to you. Little did you know, this is what actually happened. Oftentimes we have the tendency to generate conclusions about our own observations. We claim with certainty that we have discovered the truth through our observations, without recognizing the possibility of our observations misleading us. Applying Werner Heisenberg's ideas in the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum theory to the first chapter of Mouse 2, we can see the dilemma of trying to explain the unexplainable. It forces us to jump to conclusions that ignore our fundamental limitations and close ourselves off to the spectrum of possibilities that we are capable of discovering. It's often hard to wrap our head around the idea that humans have limitations. I think in comparing us to other species, this is easier to see. Take the mantis shrimp, for example. We can interpret and understand lots that it can't, but at the same time, it has access to a much larger color spectrum than we do. In this way, we have a limitation in our observation of what we believe to be true about the world. Physicist Werner Heisenberg was one of the first scientists to point out that a complete understanding of reality is beyond human capacity. The problem with the current approach to science is that we pretend our scientific concepts correspond with some absolute truth, and we fail to recognize the subjectivity of our observations. We pretend that we can describe the world without any reference to ourselves when we're the ones observing and interpreting our own observations. Heisenberg argues that we have to recognize the effect we have on our observations and incorporate that into our experimentation. The problem with the current scientific approach is that when we take measurements, we collapse our observations into our own reality, making it impossible to discover the complete truth. Just as Heisenberg proves the limitations of our knowledge and that what happens in nature depends on the way we observe it, in the opening chapters of Mouse 2, Art Spiegelman demonstrates his ability to control our interpretation of the text. Just like quantum particles, what happens in the book or in nature depends on how it is depicted and how it is interpreted. The movement of particles in the double slit experiment changes as soon as the particles are observed, just like the viewer of the text fills the holes in the story and in so doing might change the entire meaning of the story itself. Spiegelman shows us the disconnect between reality and what he chooses to portray in the text, because it's impossible to reduce the complexity of reality, especially an unexplainable event like the Holocaust, in a single comic. On page 16, he writes, "There's so much I'll never be able to understand or visualize. I mean, reality is too complex for comics. So much has to be left out or distorted. See what I mean? In real life, you'd never have let me talk this long without interrupting." Spiegelman shows us that while the reader often takes this story as if it is told exactly how it happened in real life, storytelling has biases. This bias is furthered by the layering of storytelling Mouse presents. Vladek has his own agenda in relaying his story to Artie, and Spiegelman has his own objectives in the whole book altogether. All this points to the dilemma in trying to describe something beyond the limitations of the author. Just as we saw with quantum physics, attempting to explain something without acknowledging our limitation eliminates the possibility of discovering the truth. Attempting to explain the Holocaust is just like this. By simply trying to tell the story, we may actually be skewing our ability to see the truth. The legacy of so many victims of the Holocaust is just a single pair of shoes or a single number. There are so many victims that have no voice. Yet Spiegelman chooses to frame the story of a single survivor in a limited number of comic frames. He shapes our understanding of the story based on the way he constructs it, and gives us access to layers of a single story that show what happens depends on our way of observing it.